set a timer for 35 minutes. Hello everybody, my name is Ryan Bean. I'm a substance use disorder professional licensed by the state of Washington. I've had my trainee license for about 3 years now, so I'm going on about 6,000 client-facing hours in the entirety of my time, at which I have worked at Lakeside Milam Recovery Centers, I've worked at residential treatment, and I've also worked in outpatient, both in intensive and in standard outpatient level, which would be ASAM like 1.0, and then intensive outpatient, which would be ASAM 2.0, and then residential, which would be 3.5. Today, I would like to thank all of you guys for coming out and attending. I see that we have some other clinicians here. We also have some family members, and then also some peers who just happen to stumble along to see what's going on. So today I would like to talk about something which I think is really important in the field of substance use disorder, and that's relapse prevention. It's kind of what the whole idea of everything that we do in the field. And one of the neat things that was discovered a long time ago was that there were relapse warning signs leading up to someone's initial use. The initial use isn't always where it all started. And the person who came up with that was Terence Gorski. So Terence Gorski was able to identify 37 relapse warning signs, right, that you could see to predict if someone was headed closer towards relapse, which is really crucial because a lot of people thought that they were doing very well unless they just were using. But Terence Gorski actually came up with 10 stages of relapse warning signs, and there's 37 that are breaking down. And today I'm going to be talking about phase 2, which has 3 through 8. I'm going to be talking about a couple things. I'm going to use references to Lakeside Milam Recovery Centers, which uses Terence Gorski's 10 phases of relapse warning signs, Covenant Hills Treatment Center in California, and then Mountainside Treatment, also in the middle of the country. They also reference and they use Terence Gorski's relapse warning signs for their classes. I'm also going to be using a couple books that we're going to be talking about. One is Terence Gorski's book, Staying Sober, right? There's references in my page. You can buy it at Hazleton. Betty Ford is one of them, which is a major treatment center across the world. Motivational Interviewing, the 3rd edition, by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick. You can buy it anywhere. I put a link for Barnes & Noble in the description. And then also I'm going to be talking about 12-step recovery. I'm going to use the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guide, which also kind of references some of the things that we're going to be talking about and comparing in some of these stages. Okay? Where's the timer at? All right, first off, what we're going to be focusing on today. So the purpose of what we are doing, so by the end of this 35-minute training video, clinicians and people in attendance will be able to understand Gorski's second phase of relapse, which is characterized by avoidance and denial behaviors. You'll be equipped with being able to identify and recognize these in clients or your loved ones. And if you see them, you'll be able to share with them, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or this is what I'm observing in you, and I'm worried about you. Because no one wants to hear, oh, you're on the way. So kind of educate yourself a little bit and then be able to provide people with the education also themselves, which will be really helpful in the long run instead of talking down to them. We don't want to do that. That goes against helping people change, right? Or identifying that they have some issues that are coming to fruition in their life. So first I'm going to talk about Mountainside Treatment Center. So they talk about Gorski's second phase of relapse. I'm going to take a page from their book really quick and we'll go from there. So with people living in addiction, right, they might find it complicated, right, to move and navigate through life, right? The importance of developing a relapse prevention plan, they say, is that if people do, we don't want to continue to shame them, right? We want to be able to help them get back on the right track, right? So accepting that these behaviors are kind of happening, right? We don't want to promote them, but if they do relapse, right, we want them to continue to keep coming back, and then we can look back and say, okay, like where would the relapse start, right? We really want to look at identifying risk factors that happen along the way too, which would be really important. And we also really want to help them develop coping skills for when these things do come up. It's not a matter of if, but more a matter of when. So the second phase is avoidance and defensive behaviors. So while avoidance can be evident throughout the entire recovery process, there are key indicators that your addiction has taken root and that you need are in need of deeper intervention strategies. Gorski's second phase of recovery highlights these behavioral tendencies and importance of identifying their existence in order to properly address them. This phase of the recovery, you are actively working to avoid anything that reminds you of how destructive your behaviors have become. The pain is associated with facing the truth of your addiction, forces you to make every effort possible in order to maintain your facade by avoiding or becoming defensive with anyone daring to challenge your maladaptive thought process. So according to Gorski, the most common symptoms associated with this phase are number 3, believing you'll never use substances again. Number 4, worrying about others instead of yourself. 5, defensiveness. 6, compulsive behaviors. 7, impulsive behaviors. And 8, tendencies towards loneliness. This list is by no means definitive, but it does effectively establish comprehensive understandings of the potential symptoms displayed by addictive individuals processing the second phase of recovery. Identifying these symptoms is as important as admitting that the addiction exists in the first place. By accomplishing these tasks, you open the door for the conversation to begin regarding your addictive behavior patterns and necessities of innovating a recovery plan. Sometimes beginning with the journey is the hardest part of the process, and when discussing addiction recovery, admitting that the disease is real is the first step to defeating the destructive grip. So when we look at how we should be, or how we could be approaching these things, right, I'm going to go through each individual phase step by step, share and talk with you about how it's designed along with Terrence Gorski, and how other places such as Lakeside Milam, Covenant Hills, and places like Hazelden, Betty Ford all look at it. So specific warning signs to be addressed, right, in phase 2. So when we look at step 3, this is this belief that we get that we are never going to use again, right? So as we look at it, right, this is where someone would convince themselves that using isn't an option, and that's actually not the case. From looking in the field, we all know and are aware that people all have another relapse in them. They just might not have another recovery in them, which is difficult, right? When we start looking at how this is dangerous, right, it really breaks down. So the issue is that people stop having like daily maintenance of their recovery, which is one of the biggest slogans that we see, right? It's either 1 day at a time, 24 hours at a time, basically focusing on that moment, right? Like, what can I do today to help myself with my recovery, right? But this person might just start becoming overconfident in their ability to stop using, which is a dangerous sign, right? When they let their guard down, in the beginning, they might have done things. They might have gotten up every day. They might have prayed every day. They might have called their sponsor. They might have gone to therapy every week. They might have gone to group. And they have these continual behaviors that line up that really have helped them. But if I believe that I'm just never going to use again, then what is the point of going through the process every day? Which is dangerous, right? Someone might ignore, they might stop going to specific meetings or hanging out with certain people simply because they believe that relapse just isn't an option again. It may feel like that, right, when they haven't had any thoughts of using or no cravings have returned, and that's great. However, the recovery is or can be contingent upon their daily maintenance, right, which is important to recognize what they were doing before. Timer. All right, number 4. So worrying about others instead of self. This is where many addicts may become more concerned with the recovery of others than of their own. This is really when they start to be bothered by other people. Irritability is running really high. They may not talk a lot about their concerns, but think it internally and not really voice it outwards or what they see or being able to communicate clearly. This kind of drives a wedge between them and their recovery support. In many 12-step programs across the country, right, it always talks about look for the similarities and not the difference. You can find that in AA, CA, NA, whatever kind of anonymous program you want to go to, and they're all going to tell you the same thing. This is when someone also is starting to see that they believe is wrong, right? Instead of focusing on all the positive things, they could have a lot of positive things going on in their life, right? And they just get really hyper-focused on these small inconveniences, which they believe that they are entitled to maybe not experience, which can be very dangerous for somebody, right? Especially when you look at family members, right? If someone is doing everything that they need to be doing and you just ask a concerning question, they could get ask you why you're bugging them, right? It's like, worry about yourself. And someone could also stop hanging out with people or associations, right? Just because they don't like one little tendency about them or how they mistreated them just one time, right? And then so now they stopped hanging out with all the people that they were doing for so long. Where's the timer at? So we start looking at defensiveness, right? In number 5, defensiveness, the addict can tend to defend when talking about personal problems, feelings in their recovery program, even if no defense is necessary. People just become grouchy throughout the recovery process sometimes, and like we talked about, worrying about others, just letting things kind of seep in and bug them. They may not do this when they may do this when they are feeling that they are being challenged, right? It could simply when you're asking them certain questions or aspects about the recovery or asking for more information, like how did your meeting go today or how was group, and they want to just be really short with you. This could also come in a form of worrying. For example, if a parent asks their child how their recovery is going, the individual might feel like they're not trusted and like their parents are trying to simply doubt them or discredit them. From the outside, we can see this if we had a chance to explain to someone that it's just because they have a few months sober, right? And they want to kind of overturn like 5 to 10 years of destructive patterns. It's kind of letting them know, it's important to just let them know, hey, I love you. I'm concerned for you. This is what I see. Especially with people who have been using for an extensive amount of time. I mean, some of us live with addicts who have been using for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, all of which during the time the individual has been lying, right? Stealing, very emotional, a lot of rapid mood cyclings, bouncing up and down, just depending on whether they're under the influence or not, or whether they're on the verge of being dope sick, right? That's how they taught us how to treat them, right? Always kind of be on our guard, and now that they're doing well, we just have general questions, right? And it's okay to let them know that. All right, so now we start looking at number 6, which is compulsive behaviors. So the addict becomes compulsive, which could be seen as stuck, fixed, or rigid with their thinking and behavior. There is a tendency to do the same things over and over again without good reason. There could be a tendency to control conversations by either talking too much or not at all. They could work more than is needed. They could become hyper involved in activities, right? And they also may appear to be like a model of recovery, like within, let's say, the 12-step community. They might have multiple home groups, multiple service positions. They might need to speak at every single meeting, every time they go, right? They also might start giving unsolicited advice to people, right? And in an attempt to play sponsor or therapist, right? This could be after someone has gotten somewhere along in the recovery process and they start to believe that they're better than others, think that they know best, right? We want to fix everything, right? Or we want to be able to point everything out. And it's usually with a good thought in mind, right? So they're not trying to be mean. They just become so compulsive that they're not open for change, right? Which can be deadly, right? Someone's very stuck on something and they stay in a relationship way past the expiration date. That's with either a friend group, right? Or if they had people that they were associated with who have then relapsed, right? But they continue to keep a date with them, right? And they meet them every week or they hang out with them all the time, right? And they can't break this compulsive behavior, right? They're stuck in it. They can't move on, which we always need to be open to adapt for change, right? This is going to be so critical when someone is growing, because what someone needed in the beginning might not be the same years down the road, right? Or 6 months, 9 months down the road. They might, they could stay at a job which isn't serving them, right? They could just take the bus, right, when they're fully capable of driving a car, just little things like that, or getting a new bank account, any type of behavior that's just compulsive and they keep really stuck in, right? We really want to start seeing change and growth and development along with their new life. Where's the timer at? The next warning sign would be number 7, impulsive behavior. I know a lot of times we think of impulsive behavior as things that we often do when we're in active use. However, sometimes in recovery, the rigid behavior can be interrupted by actions taken without self-control. This usually happens in times of high stress. Someone starts to become very stressed out, right? An example I could give you would be someone quitting their job, right? Moving in with somebody that they're in a new relationship with, seeking a separation in their relationship, spending money, applying for new loans, buying a new car. All of these things can be seen as impulsive behavior. And a lot of times, as long as the individual doesn't see it as impulsive behavior towards a tendency of using, they tend to kind of justify it. So sometimes these impulsive actions may cause the individual to make decisions that seriously damage their life and their recovery program. There's also a lot of online shopping, right? Gambling, also taking on too many commitments, what could lead to a disruption in their daily life. And I know we talked about like the compulsive behaviors, right? But we need a couple compulsive behaviors. We need some things that we do all the time. But when someone starts checking out and not tending to like the pretty basic things, right? The impulsive behaviors really get in the way. And the disruption in their daily routine, which has helped them so far, right? If they just switch a sponsor, right? Just because, like they're worried or they become defensive, right? They can just make rapid impulsive changes in their life, right? Which is usually a warning sign. A lot of times we're just going to be happy because we're going to ask them simply, are you okay? And they'll say something usually like, yeah, I'm fine, or I'm okay, which is always like a no answer that we don't want to hear, right? We really want to hear people describe about how they're actually doing. Oh, I'm really stressed right now. I'm really struggling. Hey, this is going good in my life. But the impulsive behavior, right, is something that we really want to look out for. And it's usually really obvious, but usually, yes, the ending thing is they're going to talk about how they still haven't been using, but it's still a warning sign that we can identify with. We can kind of share our concern with them. All right, number 8, tendency towards loneliness. The individual may be spending more time alone. They may have good reasons, right, or excuses for this, right? We really have to kind of look at where they're at, how far along in their recovery they are. But in the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guide, right, in the denial section, it asks a very simple question, which I'd like to read to you, right? Have I given plausible but untrue reasons for my behavior, right? And I can look at this, right? When we start looking at giving good reasons for not doing something, right? We talk about this in a form of excuse making, and also edifying justifiable reasons to back our claim, right? I could not go to a meeting because I'm tired, right? Or I could miss group because I'm tired, or I could stop doing something like going to therapy, which has really worked for me. And I'm like, I got this really great sponsor, even though a sponsor and a therapist are not the same thing, right? Just because like you have like some friends, right? You might tend to go hang out with them just briefly and blow off going to like your home group, right? Or being with other people. And yeah, you might also just like be tired, right? However, it is important to keep some of the things which have worked for us so clearly in these, especially in earlier stages of recovery. This stage is also very dangerous because these periods of being alone can occur more and more often if they're not addressed, right? Instead of being more social, they may become more compulsive or impulsive in this stage, right? Like when I go home, I tend to I go from work to home, take my boots off, and then I tend to not leave the house, right? I impulsively just go to McDonald's, right? Instead of going to a meeting and then going out with people and fellowshipping afterwards, right? This tendency towards loneliness. We can be spending a lot of time on social media, right, which is really dangerous for us today. Well, we think that we're connecting with other people, but it's not exactly the same. Yeah, we're sending a message to them, and I'd rather people send some message than no message. However, right, there's nothing like being in a room full of people. There's nothing like being in a group, right? We really recover as a pact, right? I have never actually met anybody since I've been in this field and in recovery myself. Right? I've never met somebody who was like, oh yeah, I'm doing so good in isolation. I'm actually thriving with nobody talking to me. We really need to look at getting in the middle of the circle, and that's what they teach us, right? And eventually we just become part of the circle and surround new people. the whole scope is to get in and get connected, right? So when we start having our tendency towards loneliness, this is really dangerous, because this is where we really want to try and stop becoming very comfortable with just seeing like our sponsor once a week, or never calling our sponsees, or not talking to our family, right? Napping in our rooms with the door shut all day, right? We need to be exposed. We need to be out in the light with people. That's what's really worked for us so far. It works for everybody, but eventually we might just be getting sick and tired of people. But if we can just identify it and then kind of push through, things can happen. What's the time we're at? So now we really want to go over a few things at which we went over, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit more about why this is important, and then I'll let you guys go. So when we look at this, right, and we look at all of these warning signs, I really like to look back and reflect on motivation and interviewing. For families, friends, and clinicians, right? We can all take some skills from this book, right? These warning signs, if they appear, right, we really need to refrain from going back and trying to fix the problem, right? Avoid the easy way out. Depending on how much trust you have with somebody, right? Remember, a lot of people are very fragile in the early stages of the recovery process, right? And so we really want to stop from using the righting reflex, because we're going to see these things which are fairly obvious to people, right? If someone's doing very well, they're going to have things that happen, and you just don't want to be like, oh, well, that's just your defensive,ness, and you're believing you're never going to use again, which is like really dangerous, and you're probably going to get high tomorrow. That's something that we don't want to say to them, right? We really want to try to pull it back and take a note from this book, right? And know that it's important to just not tell them, but educate them for what we're seeing, right? Kind of explain and use our ways of.
This is checked out to someone else.
I'm recording right now. I have like 5 minutes. Are you gonna be? Is there another room?
You wait 5 minutes?
Yeah.
5 minutes.
If you know the signs, it's important to just tell them. So we should express concern for the things at which we see. And on page 243 in this book, it talks about developing discrepancies, right? When we start looking at the person's behavior and how it aligns with what their current goals are, this should be a focus of the individual behavior and the alignment of the goals, which we should all kind of have pre-established with people. You know, we've sat down and we spent time with individuals, and they told us kind of what they want to do, how they want to do it, what they want to be part of. And this is going to be really important, because a lot of these aren't going to align with what their goals are sober if they're using. And so hopefully we can get in front of it and show it, and then they can change, right? We can work in a partnership with them, because if we just start telling people that these are all the terrible things that are wrong with them, we could get some pushback, and then we get resistance, and then we got to go into a whole nother stage of what we could do. It's important to reiterate all of these to them and what we're seeing. And if you need some help, I would advise everybody to get and read this book, right? You know, educate yourselves first, and so it becomes kind of like second knowledge. You can start to learn to talk about what is going on, how individuals are seen, and ask them also if they've ever heard of this. right? Be like, hey, I read this book and it really helped me with you, and it helped me kind of understand and see what you have going on. And there's never too much education you can give somebody. Right, everyone can kind of make up their own mind about it, but Staying Sober is the book by far which everybody uses. Along with all of these wide varieties, every treatment center that you come across, most of them, I can't say all, but most of the ones in the United States, right, are all going to be doing some sort of relapse prevention group, right, and they're all going to be using Gorski's 10 phases of relapse and then the 37 warning signs. We should be ready also to use specific examples, right? If someone is doing these things, right, mention to them, right, like, hey, you've been saying this a lot lately that you are never going to use again, right? Or I see that you've been really worried about other people lately. You want to tell me about that? Or how is that going? The defensiveness, you could reiterate to someone that you just love them. It's going to be really important to share with them that you're just concerned and that you kind of see them being more irritable and aggressive. And then the compulsive behavior, which is you could obviously applaud them if they're being very compulsive, right, with positive things, right? But ask them if they've kind of tried anything new, right? Like, hey, have you been exploring any new concepts or doing anything? That's going to be really helpful. And then we also really want to look at the impulsive behaviors. It's really easy to say something like, hey, I noticed that you've had a lot of Amazon packages coming, or you've been going to the casino every weekend, or you go out with, or you completely change your wardrobe, or what made you think about changing jobs, right? Like, what is going on? And then with the tendency towards loneliness, you know, you can always invite people out or share that they should get out of the house, right? Or take them with you or invite them, right? You could talk about this in your groups, right? As I know that I focus on that, right? I try to get the group to rely on each other. So I always do I keep in their mind that they always should be hanging out with each other and they should be doing things together. Right, and so that kind of really kind of strips them away from being able to have a tendency towards loneliness if they're constantly surrounded by people. If people are texting them all the time, asking them how they're doing, right? Getting in with a good support network, and it's really harder to fall out of that. Where are we at for time? Where's the timer at? We really want to help them come up with interventions for these two and just not say it, right? And be really thoughtful. So take in mind things that they might have accomplished earlier, right? Things that they could have gone through. And so you could share with them like solutions, right? Like, remember, you're just doing this one day at a time, you know, worrying about others, try to pull the focal point back on them. Defensiveness, this is going to happen. Just remember, like, that's going to be part of their life, their compulsive behaviors, right? Try to always be open-minded to how this might make them feel if you tell them that this is wrong. And yeah, the impulsive behaviors, it's really dangerous because a lot of people will they'll be like, I'm not using, I haven't used, why are you doing this? And then just surround them with love. And if you need any more references on this, right, please visit Mountainside Treatment, also Covenant Hills Treatment and Lakeside Mountain Recovery Centers. They all offer this whole layout of what we just went over. And then Motivational Interviewing, the 3rd edition, which is the one I have right here. They also have a 4th edition, which I haven't been able to look at yet, but it's going to be the same thing with just more updated information. The book Staying Sober, right? And then also the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guides. They're all going to have key points on identifying some of these behaviors, and then you can kind of educate yourselves and then share them with either your family, right, or your friends, loved ones, or the addict themselves, right? Well, thank you guys all for coming out, and I really appreciate your time. I will be here to answer any questions when we get done if you need. Thank you.